How many of you choose your own clothes when you go to work? Thank God, you're adults. The most professional workplace I ever had made me wear a uniform. It was very professional. It was the Israeli intelligence unit and a very unique place in it. It's been more than 10 years since I started my tech career there. And I have to say that most of the talented, high-achieving, proficient people I ever met in this industry served in the same place. And with a mandatory service in Israel of 3 years in the army, 18-year-olds are drafted to serve in technological units, which really need to make the best out of them before they leave out to the real world. I actually served 4.5 years. We worked on systems that process a lot of information coming in from a lot of places. I know it's generic, but that's as deep as I can go at this point. Intelligence, you can imagine some of those pieces. And features need to be released very quickly, maintained for a very long time, and be prepared for changes very often. So keeping this high level of requirements together with the unique challenges of being in the military and being just 18-year-olds made life very different from what I experienced when I got out. So what I want to share is those differences and how I saw them reflect and how I actually saw them improve our work, even though there were very weird limitations. And really, when I look back at the time, the greatest work happened. It was people who really, really loved what they do. They got together for the greater good. I mean, they did impossible things, and not for money. It was for their country, to save lives. It's a motivation that's very hard to compete with. Very big rush of adrenaline every time you succeed. And I served from 2006 until 2010. Some things changed since then. Some is just exactly the same. As I said, when you create something, it's there for a very long time. Now, I'm talking about great engineering at the worst environment. I promise you most of the talk will be about the worst environment, but I have to convince you that there was great engineering over there. And it's not just me pumping my own ego and promoting myself. The typical startup founder in Israel is a graduate from this unit 8 to 100. Wages are higher by 10% for those alumni. Career starts earlier than university students. In Israel, it's the same way for other graduates of other military units. So if you were a pilot in the military, your career is pretty much guaranteed. Same if you're a journalist or even did movie editing. It's a very good stepping stone if you do it well. Because you get very good hands-on experience. And this great engineering we do, we have usually very good results. We usually don't talk about them. We wait for someone else to promote us. And it's very dynamic. Everything changes. When I look back at the shift from what we thought was the most important thing 10 years ago, and when I look at it now, it's completely separate worlds even. But it all starts with finding people that actually go. And you guys are very lucky because if you want to recruit someone, you have a very nice pool of talented, qualified people. You can compete on them. The recruitment pool is high schoolers, and they don't even have experience. So what you're looking for is potential, which is something very, very hard to measure with 18-year-olds. They're very confused. They don't know what they want to do. So you have to confuse them with forms like this and questions. And kids' alternative is to go to combat. So they're pretty eager to do their best when they apply to intelligence. This means that starting from high school, kids sometimes choose hobbies or school subjects that can help them on their future career. So they can go study computer science or Arabic if they really want to go to intelligence, or they get super fit and try to accept it to special ops unit. But in general, if you build a culture that encourages people to make an effort to join it, you're probably going to get a lot more enthusiast candidates. So how does it work when you're on senior year? It's actually very similar to Americans and applying to universities, only this whole process is very black boxed and no one knows what's going on. So they cast a very wide net on all high schools in Israel. Some more focus is given to schools who generated past alumni, but in general, everyone has the same opportunity to get drafted to this unit. The Army does a few general screening tests, and those who pass a certain threshold are invited to further tests. There are 1 or 2 days of focus tests by the different technological units. So each unit provides a test. The kids who do that don't even know what this test is for, what it measures. And it could be about tech knowledge, puzzle solving, articulation, general knowledge, logic deduction. It's a whole range of things, and something that you really can't prepare for, because it's not like SATs or something. It's just, it changes from one year to another. No one leaks it. So it's really, if you're good at it, they'll find you. And those who show potential in the exams are invited to interview days for some of the units. And these days there's a panel of 3: a psychologist, a veteran commander from the unit with experience who's seen quite a few people and knows what to look for personally. And there's also a serving soldier that knows what it's like at the moment, trying to get a very good 360 view of a candidate. Eventually, the units bid on the candidates based on the ranking they have and are given priority over each other based on how important that unit is. And the candidates see the whole thing as a black box. They aren't even sure what they're being tested for or which unit is looking at them. It takes most of 12th grade just to finish with all the tests. And usually around May or June, you kind of know what place you're going to. I personally was on the waiting list for the unit I was eventually accepted to. But in July 2006, there broke war with Lebanon. And then after the war ended, the army convinced the government that there's more allocation for more people, and luckily I got in. Yeah, I know wars. Sometimes good things come out of it. So from the serving commanders in the unit, this is also a black box, because the only thing they put is an exam in the beginning and a ranking on some people. So imagine like if you apply to universities and you get accepted to a few, but you don't know which universities you're accepted into, and the Federal Administration of Universities just shows that, yes, you'll be very good at Penn State. And that's where you're going. That's how your next 4 years were decided. So these are actually bus tickets. You can get from anywhere to anywhere in Israel using these. That's a perk of being tested. You want to guess what the result is, A, B, C, or D? I also have a feeling it's this one, but I have no idea. I think so. So you got accepted.
What's the question? The thing with the round things is to the thing with the round things as the thing with the triangle is to something else. And I'm guessing it's D.
That makes sense. Yeah, it goes from right to left. That's Hebrew. So I think it's Dalet, the fourth one. Okay, so you found the people, you got them inside, and now you have to do something because they're just teenagers who finished high school. And you need an actual coding boot camp. And that means 16 hours a day, because they're the army. They can do things that in civilian life you can't do. And they're very young, so they accept it. So what it looks like. It's an all-included resort by the beach. I'm over here taking a bite. And it's a 20-week course, 16 hours a day, 5 days a week. And you don't care about anything except development and learning. So you get food, you get dorms, they clean your place. The only thing you should do is sit and study. And you learn everything from basic math to computer science, theoretics, programming languages, and even specific systems you'll eventually work with. Now, the cool thing about it is that no matter what role you get into, everyone learns Python. That's the lingua franca. That's what everyone knows. It's a baseline. It means that by the end of the course, no matter what role you have, you can at least run a SQL query on in code, process the data, and output CSV. Just very good for communication, for telling someone, hey, run this and see if it gets the results you want. So very good for interop. And everyone are nerds, basically. So the course feels like Hogwarts, full of riddles and weird things, and you're not even sure whether something is by accident or on purpose. Like the way to order the names of the students in a list. There's a puzzle behind that. You do binary push-ups when you work out. I will not demonstrate later, but you can imagine what it's like. You need like 8 beats of people, and you count. The songs in the background playlists are a riddle. So everything, you can't just go through this course with doing the minimum. You're always exposed to something weird going on. Studying is divided into small units. So you usually do only 3 or 4 things in parallel. The instructor to student ratio is about 1 instructor to 3 or 4 students. And there's a very short feedback cycle. So you learn something for like 2 hours. Then there's a practical work session to go over it. And then you hand in an exercise. And then you get the feedback back by the next work session. So you don't even wait a week to see the grade. There are no grades, by the way. There's only feedback. And there's instructors pulling all-nighters so that if you finished your work by midnight, then by 8 a.m. you'll have your feedback and you'll be better equipped to keep on studying. The course has 2 mantras. The first one is that everything is possible. And that's good. That's important. They keep repeating this at times where you think that something's not possible or that you get stuck on an exercise for a really long time. The other one is one of the leading values, which is think for yourself. So you're not allowed to compare anything. So you can't talk to people about the exercises you did because each one gets their own customized exercises. You can't tell anyone how this last session went, whether it was good or bad, or you liked it or you didn't. You're not sharing anything about that, which means there's no chance to brag, humble brag, make someone feel bad. So you only measure yourself in comparison to yourself a week ago. And all of the students are used to being the first of their class. That's the first slap of reality which they get to see that there are many people who were first of their class, and some classes were better than others. Some people finished their bachelor degree in high school, and now they're serving in the same place with you, and they ask smarter question than you, and it looks like they're just hammering at their keyboard all the time. So this could lead to ego fights, but it doesn't. Remember, you think for yourself, you don't compare. You learn to accept, you learn to learn from people. There are some exercise in couples. So you do pair programming with them and you learn. And the course just manages to suppress this one upper mentality, which is, I was very impressed with it as a student. As an instructor, I was really focused on keeping them only focused on themselves. And it's not just coding. It's also lessons about history, about culture, even ethics. I won't go into details, but there are elements of intelligence where you need to sometimes decide the good of your family or the good of the country. Whether you burn a source to alert people or find an alternative, or allow something to happen just because you don't want to let the enemy knows that you're onto them. So eventually, you finish the course after those 20 weeks, and you all get to the base together. So right on the first day on the job, you already know 60 people out of 300. So you know the lingo, you know the jokes, you know some of the people because they came to teach you. You're not a burden on anyone. So the only place I saw this really working out, in my opinion, at least is Google, with their nooglers walking around the campus, starting together a very large batch. Just you feel more comfortable when you're actually landing at a job where you know a few things and not completely out of the blue. So work starts. What is it like to be in intelligence, and what's the requirement of work actually looks like? So there's a top 10 list. That's in general how intelligence works. I'll try to be brief. The head of Intel issues his list of top 10 essential items, which actually includes 16 items. It works in hex. You want to guess what the first one is? The most important one? Any guess? Kidnap soldiers missing in action. Second one is, I think, Iran nuclear plan. So this list of items is the top priorities, and then it cascades down to the different units. So the unit focused on Iran has their own top 10 essential items that shows what's in focus for the subunits. So this helps prioritize project issues, resource allocation, and future investments. And understanding this will make clear of the requirements from anyone in Intel. You don't get attached to your project. You are not your project, because your project might not be important today, but it may be important tomorrow, depending on some things that are totally out of your control. You might be in the focus now, but once the missing soldiers were found, it's not important anymore. So you have to look at the bigger picture, and you need flexibility. Now, how the actual work was. As the software development section, we were tasked with building workflows, automatic or semi-automatic, to process information. Skip the details. And there's always a rush to develop fast solutions, because we're looking for something called the golden message, the golden nugget, which is the tactical advantage of the strategic. Because if you catch something right when it happens, in real time, like a terrorist attack, moving of a kidnapped soldier, or a weapon convoy leaving, an automated process saves lives. So that's the motivation for everyone. Get this automated process out as quickly as possible. The needs arise from an intelligence analyst, which kind of sees the whole picture and knows what's going on. They go over it with a data analyst, and they plan the workflow. And at this point, there's a semi-automatic script that the data analyst writes, kind of processes the information, just because every minute counts, and you want to get this out as quickly as possible. That's written in Python because that's the easiest way to share things around. And the developers later on are in charge of handling all the cases, making sure the flow is stable, inspecting it, logging queries, monitoring, just making sure that everything runs smoothly. The organization structure for that is a pendulum. It kind of moves. Whether you have squads of those analysts working together, or you have like a whole set of developers separately. Now, we're still in an army. So that means that once in a while, though we eat the same food, we get paid the same lousy amount, $100 per month. You get a raise to $101 after a year. That's 10% of the minimum wage. And it doesn't matter if you're a developer, an analyst, or a cleaner. So it also doesn't matter how important or senior you are, you go to guard duty. That is very humbling. That is very good for neutralizing your ego. This is also very boring. It's a day and a weekend every month and 2 weeks every year, where you go to the desert or a snowy mountain and guard. So you take books and you're going to sit there in the desert for 3 hours at a time, no phone. So it's like meditation, but very depressing. And it means that you need to leave everything behind, documented and monitored before you go. There's no remote work. You can't connect remotely and do anything. And if something happens, it's pretty nice. They send a jeep to get you back to the base. And in this jeep, there's a very poor young soldier that needs to replace you while you're doing your actual work. Honestly, you actually come back very refreshed from this thing. It's 2 weeks where your schedule is 3 hours you guard, 9 hours you're off, if you're lucky. You sleep well, or at least you sleep on a schedule. You eat fixed meals, you work out, you rest, you relax, you read books, socialize. And you know that everything is taken care of. Like, when was the last time you had a vacation like this, where you had no work worries at all? It's like being on an airplane for 2 weeks in a row. The food is worse. There's a saying like, it's a marathon, not a sprint, where you don't overwork yourself. I kind of look at it as you're always training. So you're training because at some point you'll get called to do this sprint, and the sprint might take a lot longer than you expected and turn into a marathon. So you rest, you improve yourself, you're keeping yourself motivated just in case you gotta work really hard. So with with a mandatory service of 3 years, it means that each year a third of the workforce changes. So first of all, knowledge management, super important. There's a section only devoted to encouraging and making sure that people document and share their knowledge. And the problem is that it's still an army. So first of all, people can't quit. That's, I think, the good thing, because they're there. The bad thing is that you can't just bring on more people, and you can't even fire current people. So you got to make the most out of the people you have. And resource allocation is determined once a year, so you got to make more out of your people if you want to do more. So you teach them more, you make them better, you give them bigger projects, you let them run wild with their ideas. And there are two states of mind in play. First one, did anyone watch World War Z? So they mentioned something called the 10th man, someone who needs to think differently from the others. We call it Ipcha Mistabra. It's in ancient Aramaic, which means the opposite conclusion. So someone who looks at the same data and figures out the opposite conclusion makes a case for it. The second one is the personal duty to alert. So if a soldier sees that some of the data is mistreated, they have the personal duty to alert the superiors that something is wrong. Not an option, they have to do that. That's a lesson from the war in 1973. So these two states of mind make very, very opinionated soldiers who are encouraged to speak their mind. I think it's very good, and it helps the idea flow. Now, you're not paranoid if it's actually true, and they're actually after you. And since we know what's possible, we had to be very careful, which means that you keep your phone outside the room while you work, and your computer is disconnected from the internet. This means no distractions during the day. That's nice, right? No phone rings, no push messages. It means that people talk internally and share a lot more data, ask each other questions instead of asking Stack Overflow or Google. There's still compartmentalization, that's a hard word, which means that sometimes you don't know what the person next to you is working on. I was the administrator of some database which I didn't know what the data actually meant inside. And I had to add columns and just be assured that this is the right format for them, though I don't know what goes inside. You get books. The military orders them, so they're pretty old ones, but at least they're classic. So you don't get the latest and hottest, but you get the old and tested, which also goes for the technologies we use. Use some of the battle tested and not the hot new thing. It also means that there's a lot more not invented here syndrome. Application servers, monitoring tools, programming languages, we built it all ourselves some cases. We had Blue, the best language used everywhere. It was later on improved by Glue, the greatest language used everywhere. But documentation and knowledge sharing is in the DNA. So the moment you finish writing a package or a script, you immediately go around and lecture and teach everyone about it. And it also means that if you decide to build something for yourself, you're stuck with it for a very long time, so you take consideration before embarking on a project. The last point, networking, aka reserve duty, which you have to do almost every year. So you come back, you tell battle stories, you scout for prospects, which is good, you fix bugs, you explain, you teach. It also makes very good connections for the future and helps create a circle of trust. So the main takeaway from all of those are not important, only this one. Help anyone you see. You don't know when you'll see them again, and in the worst case, if you don't see them again, you know they got to somewhere good. Thank you very much for listening. I enjoyed sharing it with you.